It's no secret that HBO makes some of the best TV shows in existence. The Sopranos, The Wire, Game of Thrones, True Detective Season 1, Barry, the list is extensive. However, there is one show on this list that is rarely mentioned today, and that show is the Oswald State Penitentiary, aka Oz, is a maximum security prison located somewhere on the East Coast, most likely New York, but this isn't definitively told to us. The show came out in 1997 and tells the story of the many inmates and employees that inhabit Oz. This show absolutely revolutionized television at the time with its violence and nuance in storytelling. I personally wasn't even alive in 1997, so I'm a couple decades late to the party, but believe me when I tell you, this show is unlike any other. So, like I said, the show takes place in the Oswald State Penitentiary as we follow the many, and I mean many, different characters through their time spent inside of Oz, spending the majority of that time in Cell Block 5, nicknamed Emerald City. Emerald City, aka M-City as the characters call it, is the most lax cell block of the handful inside of Oz. Managed by a man named Tim McManus, M-City is more of an experiment as the characters put it. The prisoners are allowed a bit more freedom than the rest of Oz as long as they behave, and if they don't, they get shipped back to Gen Pop, or general population. M-City has almost no privacy, as told by our narrator and guiding hand as we are introduced into Oz, Augustus Hill. Augustus was convicted before the show actually starts, and he used to be a crack fiend / dealer, selling the stuff because he didn't really have any other options in life. On the night of his arrest, Augustus tries to flee after his home is raided by police. Going onto the roof of his apartment building, he fires a blind shot at one of the officers pursuing him, killing the officer instantly. In retaliation, his cop buddies toss Hill off of the apartment building after seeing what he had done to their friend. This is why Augustus is in a wheelchair when we first see him in the show. Augustus is just a lovable motherfucker, and he is almost everybody's favorite character, and for good reason. After we're introduced to Augustus, he tells us how hard life can really be inside of Oz, as we follow our protagonist, quote-unquote, prisoner number 97B412, Tobias Beecher. Beecher used to be a downtown lawyer before he came to Oz, and he kind of acts as our fish out of water character. We get to experience Oz through Beecher's eyes as he tries to navigate and survive his way through the penal system that he had tried to keep people out of for so long. And let me just tell you right now that this man is completely unprepared for what is to come later on in the show. So let's go back for a second. Why is Beecher even inside of Oz? Well, Tobias was a functioning alcoholic for years before his time in prison. That is, until he accidentally took the life of a young girl named Kathy Rockwell while he was driving under the influence. Beecher was, of course, never prepared to serve time, as he has always stayed on the right side of the law. This, in return, causes him to be completely unprepared for how brutal prison can really be. I mean, right when the guy shows up to M-City, he is immediately almost raped by an African-American man named Adebisi. That is, until his life is saved, quote-unquote, by the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood named Vern Schillinger. Vern is played by the legendary J.K. Simmons, of course, and he also plays Fletcher in Whiplash. And this dude can just fucking act, bro. He has quickly become one of my favorite actors ever. So anyway, Vern decides to save Beecher, telling Adebisi to back off. This in turn puts Beecher in Vern's debt, at least in the eyes of Vern. Beecher and Vern become cellmates, and Vern immediately makes Beecher his prag. A prag is pretty much a slave in prison, serving the person above them by doing their daily chores, being completely humiliated, and essentially just being a sex slave. So let's take this in for a second. Beecher comes to Oz, immediately almost gets raped, and then he's saved by a white supremacist that also wants to rape him, even going as far as to burn a swastika onto Beecher's ass later on in the episode. If this isn't the perfect way to depict life in Oz, then I don't know what is. So that's Tobias Beecher at the start of Oz, a scared, disbarred lawyer completely out of his element with no backbone. And this quickly changes in the show, so go watch it. The next character I want to talk about is an Irishman named Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan was sent to Oz for recklessly driving under the influence as well, hitting 2 construction workers while being chased by the police with a dead body in his passenger seat. Ryan is a survivor through and through. The luck of the Irish is the perfect phrase to describe Ryan O'Reilly. He manipulates pretty much anyone that gets in the way of what he wants, and Ryan actually becomes Beecher's only friend at the start of Oz. They do drugs together, and of course Ryan always has ulterior motives, but I don't think Beecher would have gotten through his time in Oz without Ryan somewhat taking him under his wing. Ryan is definitely in my top 3 favorite characters in the entire show, and yeah, of course it's because he is cunning and charming, but also just his depth as a character is amazing. I don't think by any means that Ryan is a completely heartless monster like many other inmates inside of Oz. He definitely does some of the most fucked up things to people in the entire show, but to call him heartless would just be incorrect. Ryan O'Reilly still has love in his heart. The perfect example of this being his brother Cyril O'Reilly. God, that's a hard name to say. Cyril was brain damaged before he came to Oz, but he wasn't always that way. Ryan acts as Cyril's caretaker and his best friend throughout the duration of the show. These two are inseparable. The O'Reilly brothers used to run a gang before coming to Oz, and this was before Cyril became brain damaged as well, in part due to Ryan's recklessness. Ryan was originally shot by another inmate named Dino Ortolani before they were both doing time in Oz. Dino was originally sent to Oz for first-degree murder, shooting Ryan's friend in the process of that gunfight. However, Ryan didn't show up until after Dino for the booze cruise I mentioned earlier. This in turn causes animosity between the two, and the results of this really kicks off the entire show. So one of the last characters I really want to bring up is Kareem Said. Said is a strict Muslim that despises the judicial system as a whole and just wants to see it abolished for good. He comes to Oz with a very pompous attitude due to being a very influential and famous author outside of Oz. Said has a gift for persuasion and he absolutely knows it. He is genuinely one of the best characters in the show as we watch him struggle with moral and spiritual quandaries, doubting his faith in secret while condemning others for their actions. This show does a great job at putting people in situations where either way they decide to go will end up having catastrophic effects. Oz as a TV show has a very strange reputation. This show absolutely kicked off television even before The Sopranos, yet no one ever talks about it. People always say that The Sopranos started it all, but frankly, this just isn't true. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love The Sopranos. I quote the show on a daily basis, and while it was still very revolutionary for its time, Oz really popularized the 1-hour episode format and created storytelling methods that are still used and built upon to this day. No one, and I mean no one, was doing it like Oz back then. The showrunners were pioneers of their time. While the show isn't perfect, I'm looking at you, season 6, that will never take away from the fact that this show started it all and almost gets no recognition for it. Oz wasn't afraid to show grotesque violence on screen. In fact, they made a point of showing it. Just watching the show, it feels like you're looking into a different world almost, and that world being the prison system. The violence, the rape, the outlandish scenarios, they're all treated as everyday occurrences in Oz. Aw shit, someone got raped, bring them to Dr. Nathan. Someone got stabbed during lunch, bring them to the morgue with the rest of them. The writers do a fantastic job at dropping us into this world completely unlike our own. And as the show goes on, we just kind of accept that this is the way things are. Your favorite character could be raped, beaten, stabbed in the next episode. It just does a great job of giving off the impression that literally anything can happen in an instant, so be ready. I really love how the relationships in Oz work as well. Two people could show up being bitter enemies, and in the next season could be working together to bring down a mutual enemy. All of these inmates and employees see each other on a daily basis, so if you have beef with someone, it's not like you can just go home later and not see them for a while. These people are in the same cell block together. They see each other on a daily basis. This in turn causes relationships and rivalries to change constantly. It just depends on everyone's motivations and what's happening in Oz in that point in time. The show writers have this huge talent for making you feel attached to criminals and just absolute pieces of shit in some circumstances. You can understand how a lot of them got to where they are today and the motivations behind what they did. Now, don't get me wrong, most of these guys are massive pieces of shit, but characters like Beecher, Ryan, Cyril, Said, and many others have these sympathetic sides to him that you can relate to. Especially Cyril. Cyril's story is just incredibly sad, and this is just a little side note, but his story is just tragic. So anyway, this is a big reason why Oz is so special to me. It just feels very human. Everyone has massive flaws to them in real life, and it's no different here. Beecher had a drinking problem, and that led to the death of Kathy Rockwell. Hell, I'm an addict, and I just haven't killed anyone because of it. All this to say, your flaws can lead you somewhere you never thought possible. Beecher didn't leave his house that day thinking, oh, I'm gonna kill a little girl on her bike. No, none of us think that. These things come as a surprise usually. That's why characters like Augustus, Beecher, Rebedow, and many others just they just feel like everyday people. Anyway, man, go watch Oz. It is well worth your time. Like I said, the show isn't perfect, but it's entertaining all the way through. That being said, the first 4 seasons of the show are a masterpiece and some of the best TV written ever, in my eyes. You fall in love with these compelling, sometimes downright evil characters that are put in front of you. Not everyone in Oz is a horrible person, but everyone is most definitely flawed. You will get nowhere inside of Oz as a good and decent person. Oz brings out the worst in everyone. Thank you for watching.